The wind that morning had no business being warm. It rolled down from the hills like it had forgotten the calendar, brushing over sun-bleached roofs and hitching posts in the hollow town of Bell's Hollow. The dirt road glittered faintly with frost, but the air was dry enough to crack lips and pull tears from your eyes even if you hadn't earned them. Church bell long rusted, store signs faded like regrets, and every building leaned a little west as if they'd once hoped for rain but never got it. Out of that same wind came the girl. Barefoot, her toes sunk into the cold dust like she was trying to disappear into it. She wore a green calico dress a few winters too small and a canvas coat far too large, sleeves rolled, frayed at the cuffs, collar chewed by time. A satchel swung against her hip, limp and empty, except maybe for the shape of something folded, maybe a paper, maybe a prayer. She walked like her body had learned to follow orders her heart no longer gave. Step, drag, step. Behind the general store, a mare shifted in her pen and a door creaked open. A man stepped out, tall, heavy-shouldered, his beard dusted with gray. He watched her the way you might watch a storm just beyond the ridge, not sure yet if it would pass or settle in. Hale Kittredge didn't say a word. Just leaned against the porch post, thumbs hooked on his belt, hat low. The girl didn't look up. She passed him like wind past stone, without notice or permission. The storekeeper inside muttered something to Hale about strays and burdens and she ain't yours. But Hale didn't answer. He never did. At the sheriff's office she paused. Knocked once. Sheriff Nels Hoyt opened the door with a biscuit in his teeth and his badge half-buttoned. He squinted. You lost. My father died, she said. It came out soft, like it wasn't the first time she'd said it. Or maybe it was, and she was still tasting the shape of the words. Hoyt scratched his neck. Well, I'm sorry to hear it. But you got kin? Anyone expectin' you? She shook her head. He stared down at her, then back inside where his coffee was going cold. Ain't got nowhere for you here, sweetheart. Not in the jail, not in the stable. Try the boarding house. Or the preacher's wife, she takes in sometimes. She didn't move. Hoyt shut the door slow, like he was giving her time to disappear before guilt caught up. Across the street, Hale watched as the girl turned and walked on. He noticed the ribbon on her wrist, fraying blue, tied in a perfect knot. That was the kind of thing his wife used to do. Small, neat, final. A way of remembering or hoping, depending how you wore it. By sundown, she was curled beside the stone steps of the church, coat tucked over her knees. She didn't cry. Just folded her arms and looked up at the sky, as if waiting for it to make a decision. Hale saw her again the next morning. She was standing in front of the general store, back straight, feet planted, eyes narrowed at the ground like it had personally betrayed her. When he stepped out with his flour and lamp oil, she turned. My father died yesterday, she said, and before he could speak, she added, Can I hug you, rancher? Hale froze. She said it so plain. Like asking for a match. Like she wasn't aware that kind of question could make a man crumble if you caught him in the wrong light. He looked at her. Really looked. Her cheeks were cracked from wind. There was a healing bruise under her jaw, the kind folks don't ask about. Her hair was braided rough, likely by her own hands, and her eyes, storm gray, old in a way children's eyes shouldn't be. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't pleading. She was offering him something. Hale didn't speak. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a tin cup and walked over to the water barrel by the store. Filled it, brought it back, held it out. She took it without thanks. Sat on the step beside him. Drank slow, then curled up with her head against the wood siding. He didn't tell her to go. When the storekeeper stepped out and raised his eyebrows, Hale just looked away. That night, he left an extra blanket folded on the porch rail. In the morning, she was gone, but the blanket was draped around her like a second skin. She was sweeping his porch. Hale stepped over her to go to the barn. She didn't stop sweeping. Days passed like that. She followed him when he fed the chickens. She copied the way he laid hay, careful with the pitchfork even though it was nearly twice her height. She tried to match his step across the yard, boots clomping behind his worn-out spurs. Never once did she speak of herself again. The town didn't ask questions either. They watched. At the boarding house, Cora Driscoll whispered to Abe over stew. It ain't natural, she said. A man like that, widowed, broken, no child of his own, taking in a girl? Not talking in, Abe replied. Just not talking out. Still, it'll end in ruin. Always does. Hale heard things like that. Not directly. People knew better than to speak them to his face. But he saw it in their eyes. The same eyes that had watched his barn burn. The same eyes that hadn't come when he screamed her name, his wife's name, while the roof came down. He'd buried that part of himself. The father part. The husband part. Buried it under chores and silence and years of pretending that love was a luxury the land couldn't afford. But now there was this girl. Sweeping his porch. Feeding his dog. Hanging a blue ribbon on the barn door hook like it belonged there. One morning she pointed to a nail on the porch post and said, "That's where my papa used to hang his hat." At home. Hale looked up. The nail had been there longer than she had. Maybe longer than he had. "He was a quiet man," she said. "Said love was something you did, not said." Hale said nothing. She nodded like that was answer enough and went back to brushing dust off the step. That evening, as the sun slipped behind the ridge and painted the fields in old gold, Hale found her sitting in the stall beside his mare, humming. The tune had no shape, just a soft sound made of memory. He leaned on the gate, watching. She didn't stop, just kept humming. Then she looked up and said, "I can help more if you let me." "I ain't a skin for help," he said, voice rusty. She shrugged. "Don't mean you don't need it." That night, she fell asleep by the fire, curled around a pillow she hadn't asked for. He sat in the chair across from her, whittling the end of a stick into something that wasn't anything yet. And he realized she hadn't asked for the hug again. Not once. Not since that first day. She just waited. Made herself useful. Stepped where she wouldn't be noticed. Spoke only when silence got too loud. As if she understood already that asking made people pull away. That night, Hale placed the carved stick, still rough, vaguely sparrow-shaped, beside her bedroll. Then he went to the barn and sat for a long while. In town, the gossip reached a pitch. Miss Vexley hissed that it was improper, that the girl should be with real women, not hiding in a man's house like a ghost child. The sheriff muttered he'd look into it. The next morning, Hale was chopping wood when he heard her footsteps. He didn't turn. "You okay?" she asked soft. He split a log. Let the echo ring through the yard. "I made bread," she added. "Sort of. It's ugly. But warm." He turned then. Looked at her smudged cheeks, her flour-covered hands, the way her chin lifted like she expected criticism and was braced to take it. He didn't say thank you. He just nodded, and for her that was enough. But the sheriff came by that afternoon. Knocked once loud. Hale opened the door with a hammer still in hand. Sheriff cleared his throat. "Hale. Got some folks a skin about the girl. Legal folks. You ain't her kin and you ain't signed nothing that says she's yours." "She asked me for a hug," Hale said. Sheriff blinked. "Pardon?" Hale's voice was low. "First thing she ever said to me. Can I hug you, rancher?" I didn't answer. Still ain't. The sheriff frowned, uncomfortable. "Well, maybe you ought to answer soon. Before someone else does." That night, Hale didn't sleep. The fire popped low. The girl snored once, softly like a mouse. Her ribbon was tied around the carved sparrow's neck now, resting on her pillow. Hale stood over her for a long while, watching the rise and fall of her chest. His hand twitched. Not toward her. Toward the chair. Toward the nail on the porch post. He'd forgotten what it felt like to be chosen. She hadn't asked again. She'd just stayed. He walked out into the night, boots crunching frost. And that was when he saw it. Tied to the front gate, flapping like a challenge in the moonlight, was a note pinned to a sack of bread. Read. "The girl don't belong to you. And soon the law'll prove it." Hale didn't move. Just stared at the note. Then he untied the ribbon from his wrist and placed it in his coat pocket. And went back inside. The note stayed folded in Hale's coat pocket for 3 days. He didn't show it to the girl. He didn't mention it. Just read it once under the porch lantern, lips tightening, then tucked it away like it was something he already knew but hadn't wanted in writing. On the second day she found the sparrow carving again, this time on her plate beside a hunk of cornbread and a chipped cup of milk. It had been smoothed further, its wings sanded down, tail feathers whittled sharp. She didn't smile. She just reached for it gently like it might fly. Hale sat across from her, elbows on the table, spoon stirring beans. He didn't meet her eyes. Later that afternoon she swept the kitchen floor twice, not because it was dirty but because she needed to move. Then she folded laundry he'd left in a heap on the rocker, even though it wasn't hers. Folded everything tight, corners aligned, like someone who had once been taught the right way to live, and refused to forget it. Hale watched from the barn. Through the cracked window, her small figure moved like dust through sunbeams, not rushing, not waiting, just present. He wasn't sure when the ache started. Maybe it had been there since the day she'd asked for a hug. Or maybe longer, since the day his wife had said, "We could try again, Bo, try for a child," and he'd answered only with silence. The barn creaked. A pitchfork slipped from its nail. Hale blinked like waking from a long sleep and turned to work. That evening, while the kettle whistled and the girl washed up, a knock came at the door. 3 quick raps, then silence. Hale opened it to find Abe Driscoll standing on his porch, hat clutched in his gnarled hands, wife squinting behind him. "We've come about the girl," Abe said. Hale didn't move. The steam from his stew drifted past him like smoke from an old fire. Cora stepped forward, her voice dry. "You're a good man, Hale. No one's questioning that. But this ain't no place for a child. She's fed, sheltered, got her own bed. She needs guidance. Womenfolk. Shulin. Not," her lips pressed flat. "Not silence and chickens." Hale looked past them. Across the yard, the girl was chasing a stubborn hen into the coop, arms flapping with more determination than grace. She laughed when she tripped, the sound brief and surprised, like she hadn't meant to enjoy herself. "She laugh often?" Abe asked, following his gaze. "Not enough," Hale said. Cora pressed a folded paper into his palm. "From the judge. Petition's been signed. You'll get word soon. If you care for her, best not make this hard." When they left, Hale didn't unfold it. Just stood on the porch, the paper warm from their hands but colder than anything he'd touched all day. That night, the girl waited for him to read to her, a routine they hadn't spoken of but quietly shared. She'd bring out a tattered book she'd found in his wife's chest, Psalms and Proverbs, pages annotated in faded ink, and he'd read, voice low, stumbling sometimes, skipping the words that caught in his throat. But tonight he didn't pick it up. "I can read it," she said, sitting cross-legged on the rug, the book in her lap. Hale nodded. "All right." She read softly, her voice full of stops and starts. One hand stroked the sparrow carving like a worry stone. He listened. Every word tucked itself somewhere in his ribs, where grief and hope now shared a room. When she finished, she closed the book and asked, "Do I have to leave?" He didn't answer right away. The fire snapped. She stared at him, steady, not pleading. "I heard them. The woman. She called me misplaced." "She's wrong," he said. "But do I still have to go?" Hale rubbed his jaw. "Sometimes what's right don't matter to the ones with pens and papers. I can stay quiet." "You already do." She looked down. "I won't ask again." He sat beside her, knees cracking. "You don't have to." That night, he stayed up long after she'd fallen asleep. The carved sparrow lay between them on the table like something sacred. He thought of how his wife used to sit there, mending socks and humming. Thought of how the house had gone quiet when she died, not just in sound but in meaning. Now there was noise again, little ones, sweeping, giggling, clumsy feet. Noise that made him afraid to hope. Hale opened the folded petition. His name was there, printed wrong. They'd called him Beau. Probably on purpose. He smiled bitterly. The signature at the bottom, though, that one burned. Miss Lenore Vexley. She'd once called him a hero. The day after the barn fire, when he'd come out coughing and bleeding, dragging what was left of his wife's shawl. "You did all you could," she'd said, weeping. "God sees your heart." Now she saw something else. A lonely man with a ghost in his house and a girl he didn't birth. The next morning, Delia May, though she still hadn't spoken her name aloud, made biscuits. Or tried to. Hale walked in to find the counter covered in flour and something that looked like scorched hope stuck to the bottom of a cast-iron pan. "I forgot the butter," she said. He bit into one. It crumbled like dust but tasted like effort. He ate the whole thing without comment. She watched, waiting. He nodded. "Next time, less salt." She grinned. "I like salt." That afternoon, he took her to the ridge above town. It was where he used to go when the weight got too much. The wind was colder there, but honest. She rode behind him on the saddle, hands around his coat, chin resting between his shoulder blades. At the top, he dismounted and let her walk ahead. The valley spread wide before them, sun washing the hills in a gentle gold. Below, Bell's Hollow looked smaller than it felt, its judgments no larger than ants, its gossip too far away to matter. "I used to come here with her," Hale said. "Your wife." He nodded. "She liked to count crows. Said they carried stories." Delia watched the sky. "I think she would have liked me." He considered that. Yeah, she would have. They stood in silence until the wind picked up. Delia held out her ribbon, let it dance from her fingers. "Do you miss her every day?" Hale's voice caught. "No. Some days I forget. Then it hits harder the next." Delia didn't respond. She just slid her ribbon into his palm. "Tie it to something. So she don't get lost." He did. On the ride back, she leaned closer than before. Not tight. Just near enough for him to feel her breath on his collar. When they got home, Miss Vexley was waiting. On the porch, gloves in hand, expression tight. Hale helped Delia down before stepping between them. Hale, Lenore said, nodding. Miss Vexley. She looked past him. You're not the enemy, Hale. You're just wrong for this. Delia's grip on his coat tightened. Lenore's voice softened, though her words didn't. She needs a woman. A real home. The judge agreed. Papers'll come soon. I came to tell you before the deputy does. Hale said nothing. Delia stepped beside him. I can cook now, she said. And I clean. And I don't cry at night no more. Miss Vexley frowned. Sweetheart, it ain't about you being bad. Delia's eyes flashed. Then why do they keep leaving me? That stopped the wind. Even the birds quieted. Miss Vexley sighed. Some men aren't meant to raise girls. Especially broken ones. Hale moved then. Not fast. Just enough to step in front of Delia. She's not the broken one, he said. Miss Vexley's eyes narrowed. Then what are you, Hale? She turned and left without waiting for his answer. That night the girl didn't eat. She sat on the steps and watched the sky. Hale sat beside her, the ribbon tied to the porch post now, fluttering like it had always belonged there. She's going to take me, the girl said. I won't let her. You can't stop the papers. No, he said. But I can stop them from thinking I don't care. She rested her head against his arm. I won't ask to stay. I know. The silence between them was not empty but full, like a well dug deep and waiting for rain. Hale rose before dawn the next day. Went to town. Sat on the bench outside the courthouse with his best shirt on and a letter folded in his palm. A letter his wife had written, back when she still believed they'd try again. Read. If you find someone brave enough to choose you without promise of reward, hold on. Even if you think you're too far gone. Especially then. When he came back, the house was too quiet. He stepped inside. The fire was dead. Her bedroll was gone. And so was she. Then he saw it, on the table beneath the sparrow carving. Her ribbon. Folded. Left behind, the house echoed wrong without her. Not loud, not empty, just wrong. Like a song one note off, or the smell of smoke where no fire had been. Hale stood by the table, staring at the folded ribbon left behind. The sparrow carving rested beside it, hollow in its belly where he'd meant to carve her name one day. Her real name. The one she hadn't yet said. He picked up the ribbon, soft from wear, frayed where fingers had worried the edge. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a challenge. If you want me, come find me. The kettle whistled behind him, but he didn't turn it off. Just walked out the door and into the morning light, the sky still rubbed raw with dawn. Hoofprints led south, small, quick, uncertain. Not from a horse. From her. She'd walked. He saddled the mare and followed. She wasn't hard to track. She moved like someone who wanted to be found, not by anyone, just by one. She avoided the main road, ducked under willow branches, crossed creeks barefoot to confuse her scent. But every so often she left something behind, a stone stacked on another, a blue thread tied around a twig. Hale kept riding. By noon he reached the old mill near the river, half-collapsed, roof missing, only the stone foundation clinging to time. There, in the shadow of a chimney black with soot, he found her satchel. Open. Empty. A piece of biscuit crumbled in its corner. He dismounted slowly. The mare nickered, uneasy. The air smelled different here. Mold, ash, memory. Hale stepped inside. She wasn't there. But he saw her shape in the dirt, knees tucked under, small back against the stone. She'd rested here. Waited. Then moved on. He knelt and touched the earth where she'd sat. Still warm. Behind him, the wind shifted, carrying a sound upstream. Not words. Just a tone. A hum, high and wavering like a bird trying not to cry. He followed it. Along the water's edge, beneath a crooked cedar, he found her. Barefoot, dressed damp from creek water, hair coming loose from its braid. She was crouched on a log, throwing pebbles into the current. Her shoulders moved like she was counting each splash, giving herself a punishment she could measure. He didn't call her name. He didn't have one. He just stepped softly until the distance between them was close enough to hurt. You didn't stop me, she said without turning. I didn't want to make it worse. You made it quieter, she replied. That's worse. The wind lifted the hem of her dress. Her ankles were scratched from brambles. Hale stepped forward. Sat beside her on the log, knees groaning. He didn't speak. Not yet. She had more to say. I left the ribbon so you'd know I didn't forget. Not like the others. I know. I thought maybe if I left it you'd choose. I did. She looked at him then, eyes red, face pale beneath freckles. You waited too long. The log creaked as he shifted. I've lost things when I held too tight. And now. He reached into his coat and pulled out the note, the one pinned to the gate, now worn at the edges, soft from rereading. He handed it to her. She took it with slow fingers, read it, then held it to the wind and let it go. The paper danced once before the current took it. That's not choosing, she whispered. No, Hale said. But this is. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a strip of leather, his wife's old journal binding. From it, he'd carved a thin bracelet, notched carefully, dyed faint with berry ink. Inside, scratched with the tip of a nail, were 5 words. You're already where you belong. He held it out. She didn't cry, just stared, then held out her wrist. As he tied it on, he felt her pulse, fast as a bird's, under his thumb. Your name, he said quietly. You never told me. Delia May. He nodded, mouth twitching. Figures. She tilted her head. Why? Because it's strong. And soft. Both. They sat like that until the sun warmed their backs. Delia May leaned against him, shoulders slackening for the first time in days. But peace never lingered long in Bell's Hollow. When they returned to the ranch that evening, a man stood on the porch, deputy by badge, draped in arrogance and dust. He held a folder thick with papers, but his smile was thin. You're late, Kittredge, he said. We've been looking. Find something? Hale asked, helping Delia May off the horse. Judge's ruling came this morning. Girls to be remanded to custody until permanent placement can be found. Boarding house or Driscoll's. Your choice. Delia May flinched like she'd been slapped. Hale stepped in front of her. I didn't sign her away. You didn't sign her at all. That's the problem. Hale's voice lowered. You take her from where she's safe? Law don't care if it's warm. It cares if it's legal. Behind the deputy, Miss Vexley stood near her wagon, arms crossed, face pinched with self-righteous sorrow, as if she mourned a decision she herself had dragged into light. Delia May stepped forward. Can I speak to the judge? Not how this works, sweetheart, the deputy said. Hale stared at him. She's not leaving. Then you'll be charged. Hale breathed slow. The porch floor under him felt like it might split. Then Delia May stepped between them, fists clenched. You don't get to talk like I'm not here. You don't get to move me like I'm a sack of flour. I'm a person. And I'm staying. The deputy blinked. Miss Vexley's mouth fell open. Hale placed a hand on Delia May's shoulder. Go inside. She didn't move. He knelt. I need to do this part alone. Trust me. She studied him, uncertain. He touched the bracelet. You're already where you belong. I'll prove it. Slowly she stepped back. Into the house. Hale stood. Miss Vexley tried again. You can't keep pretending, Hale. She's not yours. He turned to her, voice steady. I never pretended. I just stopped waiting for permission. The deputy sighed. Fine. You want to fight it? Get ready. Papers'll come official. Might even go to court. Good, Hale said. I got something worth fighting for. They left. That night, the fire burned higher than usual. Delia May sat in the rocker, arms around her knees. Hale paced. You meant it? She asked. What you said to them? I did. You're scared. I am. Why? He stopped. Because hope's louder than fire. And I've seen what fire can do. She stood, crossed the room, and placed the sparrow back in his hand. You made this for me. I started it before I knew it was yours. Then you already hoped. He didn't argue. Later, while she slept in her corner bed with the carved sparrow tucked under her chin, Hale wrote a letter. To the judge. To the sheriff. To anyone who might need reminding. He wrote about her chores. Her quiet. Her ribbon. Her grit. He wrote that she never asked twice, and never had to. And in the final line he wrote, she doesn't need saving. Just someone who stayed. But the next morning the house was silent again. He rose, heart thudding, and checked her room. The bed was made. The ribbon gone. So was she. Then he saw it, pinned to the doorframe with a rusty nail. A scrap of her dress. And a smear of blood. Hale didn't run. He walked. Fast and heavy, like each step was tamping down panic that threatened to rise from his gut and choke him. He held the scrap of cloth between 2 fingers, torn from her dress, blood smudged along the hem, and kept his other hand resting near the revolver he hadn't touched in 5 years. The tracks weren't hard to follow. Whoever had taken her hadn't bothered hiding them. Wagon wheels carved into the soft mud near the back fence. One of the chickens was dead, necks snapped, like anger had spilled out on whatever was closest. By the time Hale reached the edge of town, the sky had softened to pewter. The clouds held back rain like a secret. His boots were caked in the dust of roads he hadn't walked since the funeral. The first place he looked was the Driscolls'. The gate was locked, curtains drawn. Cora peeked through the window but vanished before he could knock. He didn't bother trying twice. Next, the boarding house. Miss Vexley's lace shawl hung on the porch rail like a warning. He knocked. Nothing. He pounded harder. The door creaked open. "She's not here," came the voice, sharp, certain. Hale stepped into the light. "Where is she?" Miss Vexley stood in the hallway, hands clasped tight enough to whiten her knuckles. "She bit a man. Scratched another. Took off running. I wasn't going to call the sheriff, but—" "She wouldn't come here," Hale said. "She had no place else," she snapped. "We tried to help. That girl's wild, Hale. Like something half-grown and half-scared of being tamed. She's not a horse. She's not a daughter either." Hale turned without a word. He headed for the place no one liked to name, the ruins by Hollow Creek. A half-burned chapel stood there, long abandoned after a lightning strike set it ablaze years back. It hadn't been repaired. Folks said prayers got lost in the ashes. It was where he'd buried his wife's wedding shawl. It was where he went when he couldn't breathe. He found her behind it, crouched beneath a splintered window frame, shivering. Her braid was undone. Her dress torn. A thin line of blood streaked down her shin. She didn't flinch when she saw him. "I thought maybe you wouldn't come," she said. He knelt, not close but close enough. "I didn't want to hope," she added, voice breaking like river ice. "I was scared too," Hale said. "Still am." She looked down. "They dragged me. Said I was property. That I wasn't wanted. They're wrong. I hit one with a poker," she said, tone flat. "That's why they let me go." He half smiled. "Good aim?" Missed his nose. Got his pride. Hale nodded once. "Let's clean that leg." She didn't move. "I don't want to go back," she whispered. "You're not. But they'll keep trying." Hale didn't answer right away. The wind shifted. Smoke, faint and distant, whispered through the trees. "Let me tell you something," he said finally. "About the fire." Her eyes flicked toward him. "I didn't save her. I tried but I didn't. The barn fell." She screamed once. And then it was only the sound of burning. Delia May was silent. "For a long time I thought maybe God had taken everything because I couldn't give her a child. I thought maybe I'd been born wrong and she paid the price for loving me anyway." He looked at his hands, calloused, scarred. "I told myself I'd never risk loving again. Because I can't be enough. I can feed people. Protect them. But I can't give them the thing they want most." Delia May's voice was small. "What if all I want is to not be left?" Hale looked up. "I don't need to be someone's real daughter," she said. "I just need a place where the door doesn't shut behind me." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the folded ribbon. "You forgot this." "No," she said. "I left it." He opened it gently, smoothing it flat. "It's yours now," she said. He looked at her then, really looked. Not as a child. Not as a stray. But as someone who had survived more than she should have and still had enough in her to offer someone else a home. "I'll take you back to the ranch," he said. "And I'll stay. If it takes letters, courtrooms, lawyers, I'll do it. But I won't let them take you again." "You sure?" "No," he said. "But I'm still choosing you." Delia May blinked fast, then crawled into his arms and tucked herself there like she'd been born to fit. They stayed that way until the first drop of rain touched her cheek. When they returned to town it was quiet, too quiet. Miss Vexley stood outside the boarding house, arms crossed, face pale. "The sheriff's coming," she said. "Says you're interfering with placement. He's bringing men." "Let him come," Hale said. "You'll be arrested." "I'd rather be caged for love than praised for abandoning it." Behind him, Delia May held tighter to his coat. Hale turned toward her, jaw set. "Whatever happens next, I'm not letting go." She nodded. But then the church bell rang, once sharp. It hadn't rung in 10 years. Hale froze. Delia May looked up. "What does that mean?" "It means someone's making noise," he said. "And they want everyone to hear it." Across the road, a crowd was forming. Small at first, curious faces, uncertain voices. Then someone shouted, "The judge is comin'." And Hale understood, this wasn't over. But maybe it had finally begun. The bell rang again. It didn't chime like a blessing. It tolled like a warning, low, hollow, and meant to stir something in the gut. Hale stood still beneath the porch awning as the crowd thickened in the street. They were drawn by the sound, but more than that, by the scent of something about to happen. Justice or spectacle, most folks didn't know the difference anymore. Delia May stood beside him, not hiding. Her chin was up, though her fingers clutched his coat hem like a lifeline. The rain had stopped, but the wind kept pushing her braid across her cheek, and she didn't bother brushing it away. He could feel her trying to be brave the way small things try to look bigger, by standing still, not blinking, refusing to flinch. The judge stepped down from his buggy with a grim face and boots too clean for Bell's Hollow. Behind him, Sheriff Hoyt followed, arms crossed, mouth flat. The man wasn't cruel, just tired of anything that didn't fit neat in a ledger or cell. Hale stepped off the porch. "Judge Corwin," he said, voice even. The judge gave a brief nod. "Hale Kittredge. You came fast. There were complaints. Papers filed. Allegations. You read mine?" "I did. And? We'll settle it here." People cleared space, forming a loose circle in front of the chapel steps. A trial without pews. Just dirt and eyes and the weight of one man's word over another's. Miss Vexley stood by the sheriff, hands tight on her purse. The Driscolls weren't far behind her. Others gathered. The storekeeper, the blacksmith, a half-dozen faces Hale had known for years but never heard say more than good morning. The judge raised his voice. "We are here under informal proceeding to address custody of one Delia May, minor, unclaimed by kin, and currently residing unlawfully with a non-guardian adult." Hale exhaled. Not at the words, but at the word unlawfully, like kindness had been scribbled outside the lines. The judge looked to him. "State your claim." Hale nodded. "She came to my porch 3 weeks back. Told me her father died. Asked if she could hug me." A ripple went through the crowd. He continued, steady now. "I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. But I let her stay. Not because I was lonely. Not because I pitied her. Because I saw something in her I'd buried after my wife passed. Oh, not the loud kind. The kind that sits quiet until it's safe." His voice caught, but he didn't look away. "She never asked twice. Not to stay. Not to be fed. Not even to be seen. But I saw her. And once I did, I couldn't look away. She's worked beside me every day. Learned. Grown. Laughed sometimes. And I've failed to do a lot in this life, but I have not failed her." The judge turned to Delia May. "Do you want to speak?" She stepped forward. Hale moved like he might stop her, then let his hand fall. She cleared her throat. "I don't need a new name. I don't need toys. I just want a place where nobody leaves in the night. I asked for a hug once. Not because I needed a father. Just someone to hold still long enough that I knew I was real." Miss Vexley stepped forward, eyes shining but mouth hard. "She is a child. She needs guidance. Books, school, and a woman's presence. She needs safety," Hale said, sharper now. "And no one in this town offered that but me." The judge lifted a hand. "Enough." For a long moment he said nothing. Just let the wind carry silence through the crowd. Then he looked down at his ledger. "There's no law against a man raising a girl who isn't blood. But there is against harboring her without effort to make it lawful. What you wrote, Kittredge, was moving. What you did, that was brave. But feelings don't overrule failure to follow proper process." Hale felt Delia May's hand slip into his. Her fingers were cold but steady. The judge's eyes softened a breath. "However, the girl is of age to speak for herself, and by my authority as circuit judge, I can allow provisional guardianship to the man she names." Miss Vexley's gasp was the only sound louder than the wind. The judge turned. "Delia May, do you name this man as your guardian?" She didn't hesitate. "I name him as mine." The judge nodded once. "So ordered." Formal papers to follow. Hale exhaled, knees nearly buckling with it. Around them the crowd began to break, some nodding, some frowning, some already forgetting. But in the hush that followed, it was Delia May who moved first. She turned, looked up at him, and whispered something she hadn't dared to say since the first day. "Can I hug you now?" Hale knelt. He didn't answer. He just wrapped his arms around her, the way a man might wrap his heart in something breakable and call it worth the risk. The wind shifted. And somewhere far off, a bell rang one last time, not a warning but a promise.